Welcome back to the show that turns facepalms into punchlines. I'm Ethan Blake, and tonight we enter the land where public figures confuse shouting with substance and hashtags with heroism. From failed speeches to awkward interviews, the cringe is real, the damage is permanent, and the comedy writes itself. But I'm not here just to laugh. I'm here to highlight every glorious train wreck, frame by frame. So grab your beverage of choice and watch as we dive into the digital gladiator arena. Trust me, it's less CNN, more Comedy Central with fangs.
Because at the end of the day, America is going to want a president who is a decent human being, who doesn't shit on other people, who has some interest in the American people, some interest in something beyond himself. I think at the end of the day, people are going to reject this bigoted, divisive figure.
So I'm just giving you the answer to the question you're asking all night long. Why do they vote for Donald Trump? It's not always because they like him. No. It's because stuff like that is kookier to them.
Bill Maher just unleashed a fiery takedown on Adam Schiff, torching the California senator for his relentless and ultimately pointless crusade against Donald Trump. The roast was so brutal, you'd be forgiven for thinking Schiff might never show his face on Maher's set again. Maher didn't hold back, calling out the futility and political theater behind Schiff's endless anti-Trump campaign. It was sharp, unfiltered, and hit right where it hurt. If this kind of raw, no-holds-barred commentary is your thing, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Because this is only the beginning.
I think it's true justice. The only thing he cares about is himself and money. And going after the money is a way to bring about some real justice.
Adam Schiff opened the evening with his trademark tirade against Donald Trump, launching into a familiar narrative that painted the former president as a narcissist consumed only with self-interest. With passionate intensity, Schiff claimed Trump was unquestionably guilty of every allegation thrown his way, and went as far as to say he was utterly unfit to hold office again. He didn't stop there. With his signature dramatic flair, Schiff escalated his rhetoric, casting Trump as an existential threat to American democracy and warning that another Trump presidency would plunge the nation into chaos. It was vintage Schiff, strong on theatrics, short on concrete evidence, and dripping with partisan undertones. But just when you thought he had reached peak drama, Schiff crossed a line. He made a statement so bold, so reckless, that it's almost guaranteed to come back and haunt him, especially when weighed against the very standards he claims to uphold. Stay tuned, because what he said next turned heads and raised eyebrows across the political spectrum.
I don't share your pessimism about this or your pessimism about the general election. The reason why Joe Biden is going to beat Donald Trump is because at the end of the day, America is going to want a president who is a decent human being. Who doesn't shit on other people, who has some interest in the American people, some interest in something beyond himself. I think at the end of the day, people are going to reject this bigoted, divisive figure.
Schiff kept up his relentless assault on Donald Trump, throwing out every insult in his arsenal in what felt like a frantic effort to undermine the former president's credibility. But the moment that's likely haunting Schiff the most today, his overly confident prediction that Joe Biden would win the election with ease. Fast forward, and reality dealt him a brutal slap. Donald Trump is now the president. Schiff's bold proclamation has aged terribly, turning into a punchline rather than a prophecy. Now he's left looking embarrassed, fumbling for excuses and desperately trying to spin the narrative. It's political karma at its finest. Ironic, humiliating, and impossible to ignore. As Schiff's rant dragged on, even his fellow panelists began to show signs of fatigue. Bill Maher kept his composure, just barely, but you could see the irritation building. And Stephen A. Smith? He couldn't hold it in any longer. His reaction was priceless, as he finally broke the silence and delivered a sharp response that stopped Schiff in his tracks.
And I'm just getting tired of seeing so much stuff targeted in his direction, but somehow, some way he still survives. I mean, we're talking about a situation where he's still going to be the GOP nominee. He's still going to be running for president. You're President Biden. That's the individual that you're going to have to beat. 4 indictments, 91 counts. They ain't even bringing up the bankruptcies, ain't even bringing up this particular issue with this civil case, and somehow, some way, he puts cats to shame because he clearly has more than 9 lives. I mean, come on.
Even before Bill Maher had a chance to speak, Stephen A. Smith came out swinging. He boldly took aim at Adam Schiff and his political allies, calling out their years-long obsession with taking down Donald Trump. From breathless media hit pieces to nonstop investigations, recycled scandals from the 90s, and unhinged comparisons to the world's most reviled dictators, they've tried it all. They've branded him as Hitler, declared him the ultimate threat to democracy, and hurled every allegation in the book. But here's the kicker. None of it has worked. Trump hasn't just endured the storm. He's thrived in it. Against every prediction, he's still standing, louder, tougher, and more unrelenting than ever. He's the political enigma the Democrats and their media allies can't solve. Each time they think they've buried him, he rises from the ashes, stronger and more defiant. Whether you love him or hate him, there's no denying he's a force they just can't defeat, and that drives them mad. After an entire evening of relentless anti-Trump noise, Bill Maher finally stepped into the conversation. And what followed was pure political demolition.
The Atlantic put out an article last year, and it was called Separating Sports by Sex Doesn't Make Sense.
Right.
And talked about how we separate sports like the WNBA just because it's just socialization. This is insane.
I agree.
Okay. That's why people vote for Trump. Because there's stuff like that on the left that people just go, I know Trump's horrible, but separating by sports by sex makes perfect sense. And if you think it doesn't, you can't leave the country.
Bill Maher didn't hold back. He went straight for the jugular, telling Adam Schiff exactly why so many Americans continue to vote for Donald Trump, and he didn't sugarcoat a single word. Maher pointed directly at the Democrats' hollow policies, their increasingly out-of-touch worldview, and the widening gap between their priorities and the real concerns of everyday Americans as the true reason behind Trump's enduring popularity. One particularly glaring example Maher highlighted was the left's push to eliminate biological distinctions between men and women in sports. By insisting that biological males compete against women, Democrats didn't just challenge norms, they insulted basic common sense. To millions of Americans, this wasn't progressive, it was absurd. But rather than consider public backlash, Democrats dismissed objections as bigotry and dug themselves even deeper into the ideological hole. Maher argued that this kind of extremism doesn't inspire support. It drives people away. It doesn't build consensus. It fuels resentment. And that's why, time and time again, voters, even ones unsure about Trump, end up backing him. Because when forced to choose between ideological chaos and someone who at least acknowledges reality, most Americans will choose the latter every single time.
Senator Schiff, given the ongoing political tensions and Trump's actions toward his critics, do you think President Biden's preemptive pardons turned out to be more important than initially expected? Let's first tell people what that means, preemptive pardons. That was pretty unprecedented, right? Before he left office, Joe Biden pardoned you and a number of people who he thought Trump would go after.
No, I take the opposite view. I don't think he should have given the pardons at all.
Really?
No, I don't think he should have, and I was vocal about that at the time.
Can you refuse a pardon?
That's less clear because in the case of the January 6th committee, he pardoned essentially the whole committee.
Did Senator Adam Schiff just subtly throw President Biden under the bus? Because from the way he's talking, it sure seems that way. Schiff, who was deeply involved in the infamous January 6th committee, conveniently benefited from a sweeping pardon, along with other committee members implicated in accusations of political overreach. That pardon came from none other than President Biden himself. Now, if everything the committee did was perfectly legal and their conclusions were unassailable, why would Biden feel the need to issue preemptive pardons at all? That alone raises serious questions. And here's where it gets even murkier. Schiff is now acting like the pardon wasn't needed, almost as if Biden overstepped or jumped the gun. He's not saying it outright, of course, but the implication is clear. Biden might have made a political blunder. This isn't just awkward. It's Washington hypocrisy at its finest. Schiff gladly accepted political cover when it benefited him, but now that things are heating up, he's distancing himself from the very shield that saved him. Classic move. Take shelter during the storm, then pretend you were never in danger. Bill Maher didn't let that slide. He called Schiff out on national TV for his two-faced behavior and blasted the mainstream media for blindly protecting the left. Maher's takedown wasn't just about Schiff's maneuvering, it was a broader indictment of the political games and media complicity that so often define Washington.
And so the FBI came in and arrested the judge. No, I haven't heard that. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think I've ever read arrested a judge. So is this significant?
Well, I think
I'm not going to comment on something I don't know more about than what you've just told me.
You read about it too.
Yeah, I mean, I read about it, but I don't know.
So you don't trust anything either, and you work for the New York Times.
Well,
Absolutely. Even Bret Stephens, a columnist for the New York Times, has openly admitted he can't always trust his own paper's reporting. Let that sink in for a moment. When seasoned journalists start casting doubt on their own newsroom's integrity, you know the rot runs deep. This growing distrust isn't just a fringe sentiment, it's exactly why Donald Trump and millions of Americans are turning to independent and alternative media sources. The truth is, the legacy media has lost its way. Outlets once revered for holding power accountable have transformed into ideological echo chambers. Rather than reporting the news, they push carefully constructed narratives, often designed to protect political allies and demonize dissenting voices, especially from the right. It's frustrating. It's disheartening. And frankly, it's dangerous. Journalism used to be about seeking the truth, challenging authority, and informing the public. Now it feels like just another arm of the political machine. Every time a journalist like Stephens speaks out, it cracks the foundation further. And for many, it confirms what they've suspected for years. If you want honest reporting, you have to look beyond the establishment, because the mainstream isn't just failing, it's actively misleading.
Catholic schools are popular now, even with people who aren't Catholic, because it's the last place you can send your kid to get an old school education. And they just tell the kids, forget about the Jesus stuff. Just, to them, that's okay indoctrination, as opposed to some of the other indoctrination that goes on. And also, the Catholics don't put up with bullshit. They take your phone, you have to learn your P's and Q's and your grammar and all this kind of stuff. And that's what I just don't understand, that parents don't have the whip hand anymore. Not that you should actually use a whip. And I don't have kids, so I don't know that firsthand, but every movie and TV show that has a teenager in it cannot be mischaracterizing this. And the kids they don't listen to their parents, they turn their back on them, they walk out of the room, things that would just get me shut down when I was a kid.
We all remember when the unraveling truly began, right around the moment the Democratic Party went all in on woke ideology, tossing out common sense, tradition, and basic moral grounding. That's when the cultural fabric began to tear. Suddenly, kids weren't kids anymore. They were treated like miniature adults with unchecked autonomy, while parents, especially fathers, were reduced to punchlines in a progressive comedy script. Television helped lead the charge. Family sitcoms shifted into subtle propaganda machines. The clueless dad, the marginally capable mom, and the all-knowing child who routinely outsmarts them both. At first, it felt like harmless fun, but over time, it became a blueprint for how society should function or malfunction. Entertainment morphed into indoctrination. The result? A generation of kids raised without clear boundaries, reverence for authority, or a shred of accountability. Discipline was demonized, parental roles were undermined, and the family structure, once the bedrock of American culture, was ridiculed into irrelevance. Now, we're paying the price. The values that once anchored communities have been replaced with performative activism and empty slogans. And yes, these cultural missteps played a massive role in the Democratic Party's stunning losses in the 2024 elections. One of their own even admitted it.
I respect the fact that you don't share my pessimism. I truly do. I understand where you're coming from. But I think that's part of the problem. I think the Democratic Party should share my pessimism. I think they should be on high alert. I think they need to treat him with the seriousness that it deserves, because
Oh,
you having a lot of faith in the American people. The man did get over 74 million votes. You've got people that are looking at Joe Biden. I'm not going to call him a cognitive mess or anything like that. That's very disrespectful. I would never speak about our president that way. But when you're 82 years of age, it's not offensive to say you're no longer a spring chicken and you don't seem to have.
Beyond their questionable policies and ideological confusion, Adam Schiff and his political allies spent years trying to convince the American people that Joe Biden was fully capable, mentally and physically, to serve as president. They ignored warning signs, dismissed bipartisan concerns, and ran cover for every gaffe, misstep, or moment of confusion. No matter how glaring the evidence, they continued to insist everything was under control. Spoiler, it wasn't. By the time the truth became undeniable, the damage was already done. Biden's inability to inspire, lead decisively, or even appear coherent in public became a massive liability. That's when desperation took over, and the Democrats scrambled for a backup plan. Enter Kamala Harris. She was supposed to be the safety net, the fresh face to rally around. Instead, she turned out to be one of their most disastrous political decisions. Her approval ratings dropped like a rock. Her public remarks became walking controversies. Instead of strengthening the ticket, Harris weakened it further, and with each new misstep, the Democrats' credibility eroded. The same party that once boasted about its strategic brilliance suddenly looked paralyzed, out of ideas, and backed into a corner of its own making. What we're seeing now is a direct result of their decisions, years of embracing extreme woke narratives, abandoning rational discourse, and putting loyalty over leadership have cost them dearly. Elevating a visibly struggling president and then doubling down with a deeply unpopular vice president, that's not strategy, it's political malpractice. This isn't just about the failures of two individuals, it's a broader reflection of how the Democratic Party has strayed from the priorities of everyday Americans. Bill Maher and Stephen A. Smith's blunt commentary is proof that even loyal liberals are waking up. People are exhausted from the constant deflection, the gaslighting, the media filters, and the non-stop political theater. Trump's continued influence isn't just about his own popularity. It's about the failure of the system that tried to crush him. Americans are pushing back, and not just on policy. They're rejecting the entire machinery that tried to script the national narrative and failed miserably. And now, the cracks are showing. Even those who once defended the left's every move are starting to ask tough questions. That's what happens when the truth finally cuts through the noise. Thanks for sticking with us. If you found this breakdown insightful, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more content just like this. See you in the next one.